time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it's a warm welcome to you on this Monday, the 19th of January, 2026. It is 2100 hours, 60 minutes of the very latest news in and around your world, whether you're listening from the heart of Africa or other parts of the globe. Welcome to it. We bring you the faces, the voices, and the perspectives that matter. And of course, your perspective matters. You can stream live to Channel Africa on YouTube. We are available on Facebook, and of course we are on the socials as well. But do reach out to us, send us your views, your thoughts on some of the stories that we're covering. +27 63 406 9126. That's +27 63 406 9126. And now let's start with your top stories this hour.
It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app.
And we start with this. Nigerian Air Force's strikes have destroyed about 10 canoes and killed more than 40 militants preparing attacks in Borno State. The military made the report in the latest of a series of operations targeting groups around Lake Chad. Borno, where fighters from militant groups Boko Haram and ISWAP have recently intensified attacks on military convoys and civilians, remains the epicenter of the 17-year Islamist insurgency in the northeast of the country. Air Force spokesperson Ehimen Ejodame in a statement said the airstrikes foiled the planned attack. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has highlighted the urgent need to reform the scholar transport system to ensure the safety of learners following the deaths of 13 learners in a crash involving a truck and a scholar transport vehicle near Vanderbijl Park in the south of the Gauteng province. 3 other learners were critically injured and are being treated in hospitals. Speaking during an oversight visit in Mpumalanga province, Ramaphosa says he is devastated to hear about the tragedy.
It's a terrible occurrence. Our scholar transport system obviously needs to be well geared up to ensure that the safety of children is prominent. And those who transport our children, drivers, the vehicles, as well as their behavior on the road is such that it saves the lives of children. So I'm devastated myself to hear right at the beginning of the year that 13 children at one go have lost their lives.
And staying in South Africa, where the government says it has deployed military helicopters to help in the search for the missing Ekurhuleni MMC Andile Mgwevu. The country's Department of International Relations says Mgwevu and 3 others went missing in Chokwe in Mozambique after their vehicle was swept away by floodwater in that country. The area has been affected by recent heavy rains, which also affected the South African provinces of Limpopo and Mpumalanga. One occupant of the vehicle has been found safe and is in contact with the South African rescue teams. The department spokesperson, Clayson Munyela, says the South African authorities have joined forces with their Mozambican counterparts in this operation.
The mission has also made contact with the only person that managed to get out of the vehicle at the time of the incident. It was established that there were 5 people in the vehicle. The status of the other 4, and this includes the MMC, is yet to be confirmed. We've also been told that the South African National Defence Force will send 2 Oryx helicopters to Mozambique to assist with search and rescue operations.
To East Africa now, where President Yoweri Museveni says Sunday that his landslide victory in Uganda's elections showed the dominance of his party, which has governed the East African country for 4 decades now. Official results showed Museveni winning a landslide with 72% of the vote, but the poll was criticized by African election observers and rights groups due to the heavy repression of the opposition and an internet blackout.
The opposition were lucky because 10 million of my people did not turn up. There would have been embarrassed badly. Because you see, we got 8 million votes, about, but 10 million of them did not turn up. So we must find out why. Why the 10 million? Me, I have some reasons which I will discuss with SEC. So the opposition are lucky, because if all our members turn up, there will be no opposition in Uganda, I can assure you.
Meanwhile, Uganda's opposition National Unity Platform has formally rejected the outcome of the country's January 15 general elections, which declared incumbent Yoweri Museveni the winner by a landslide. The party alleges that the polls were fundamentally flawed, citing what it describes as credible evidence of widespread irregularities that compromise the integrity of the democratic process. In response, the NUP chapter in South Africa is today held a protest at the Ugandan embassy in Pretoria. Channel Africa spoke to protester Adam Nsubuga.
Today we choose to come here. We are going to send our petition to Ugandan embassy for our complaint or the things happening in Uganda. Things is not right. The election was not free and fair. The way they abducting our sons or our brothers and sisters, things is not right. So that's why today we are here, so that we can deliver our petition to Ugandan embassy, to be trying to send a message to our ambassador that whatever is going on in Uganda is not right, it's not free and fair. The election was not good. It was many things which was not right to our brothers and sisters, abducting our brother, jailed our brother for no reason.
In other news, the Central African Republic's Constitutional Court has validated President Faustin Achanga Touadera's victory in a disputed December 28 presidential election that handed him a third term, even before provisional results were announced on the 5th of January. Touadera's opponents had alleged fraud, but the government denied that. Final results from the Electoral Commission show that Touadera's main rival, former Prime Minister Aniset Georges Dolugel, received 13.5% of the vote. Another competitor, former Prime Minister Henri-Marie Dondra, who got 2.97% of the vote last week, acknowledged Touadera's victory and said he decided not to appeal. To the United Nations, where Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the US is ripping up the international rulebook, believing the power of law should be replaced by the law of power. In an interview, Guterres called for reforms to the Security Council that would limit the veto powers of permanent members such as the US and Russia and better reflect the world that exists today. The BBC's James Landale has the details.
The Security Council is the most powerful body at the United Nations, with the US, China, Russia, France and the UK as permanent members. But Antonio Guterres said it was now ineffective and no longer represented the world that existed today. The Council's composition, he said, should be changed to regain its legitimacy. He also said the power of permanent members to veto decisions should be limited. Some, he said, were using their veto to frustrate the will of a huge number of UN members in ways that were very difficult to swallow. In recent years, the US has vetoed decisions on Gaza, Russia on Ukraine.
And Kurdish forces in Syria say they're facing continued attack from the Syrian military despite reaching a ceasefire deal. The SDF says there have been clashes near a prison in Raqqa holding detainees from the Islamic State group. It warned of dangerous consequences if government forces seize the prison. The BBC's Sebastian Asher reports.
The SDF, the Kurdish-dominated group that's held sway over much of the northeast of Syria for years, has suffered a series of setbacks and defeats in the past few weeks. The group has now agreed to pull out of two provinces, Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor, while holding on to the Kurdish-majority region of Hasaka, further to the east. There are reports of government forces now patrolling the streets of Raqqa. It's a major gain for the Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, marking the biggest shift in the power balance in Syria since he himself toppled Bashar al-Assad.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And it's now 10 minutes past 9. The Nigerian government has expressed condolences to the governments and peoples of South Africa, Mozambique and Zimbabwe following the tragic loss of lives in recent devastating floods. The floods are reported to have claimed the lives of more than 200 people and displaced thousands across parts of southern Africa. That's after weeks of torrential rainfall that left entire communities cut off. In Zimbabwe, the Manicaland province has been hardest hit with 41 fatalities and hundreds of displacements. For more on what's happening in that region, we're joined from Gweru in Zimbabwe by independent journalist Wellington Muzengeza. Wellington, a very good evening to you. It's devastating news in southern Africa, but I believe of the three countries, Zimbabwe seems to have paid the brunt of it all. What can you tell us about the recent damage and what meteorologists there are saying about the causes of the heavy floods?
Thank you so much, Tsepiso, for having me tonight once again. Oh yeah, it's been a devastating week in Zimbabwe. We've seen 74 people dead to date. It's a very unfortunate time. The rains, which are supposed to come with fortune, are actually bringing death. We have seen over 1,000 homes destroyed and over 10,000 people displaced because of these floods. And the focus are that from tomorrow, the 20th, until the 24th here in Zimbabwe, we're expecting heavier rains as well. So it's actually a terrible time for Zimbabwe at the moment. Especially looking at we're at the peak of the rain seasons, which means we should be preparing for harvest in the next 2 months or so. But then we're seeing roads, bridges, and other economic infrastructure being cast away or being destroyed by these floods. It's a very unfortunate time.
And Manicaland itself barely fully recovering from the devastation of Cyclone Idai in 2019. So just how far were those recovery projects? And are there early warning systems given what is happening now?
Well, you're right. It's barely 10 years. It has not even been long since Cyclone Idai, and Cyclone Idai had even more devastating effects. And whatever early warning systems that had been placed, if they were there at all, have not been effective. Clearly, because we have seen in Manicaland 41 people dead to date. And there are specific cities or areas like Mutare and Chimanimani and Chipinge, which saw severe flooding and the bridges washed away and rural roads have become impassable. But this Manicaland is the hardest city. We have also had other provinces like Mashonaland West, where we've had 19 fatalities that have been reported, and areas around Chinoi and Kariba experiencing regular flash floods, damaging homes and cutting off access to clinics and also schools. And here in Zimbabwe this week, schools opened just this last week. So you can imagine what is happening. And then in the Midlands, where I am based now in Gweru, 13 deaths have been recorded with flooding, specifically in this city, Gweru, which is the third largest city in Zimbabwe, and Kwekwe, which is the fourth largest city in Zimbabwe, which have had disrupted transport and destroyed sections of the main Harare-Bulawayo road. All right, or the highway. Then we've had cases in Mashonaland East, Mashonaland Central, and West, where there's also been significant destruction. Pretty much the whole of Zimbabwe has not been spared with these by these rains. They are both a curse and a blessing at the same time. But at this point, it's more of a curse than a blessing.
And if you could just describe, the environment, the topography of where you are, Wellington in Gweru, to just give a sense to our viewers, our listeners, on when these people are facing these floods, what access is like, how quickly are they able to flee, if at all, and also the some of the infrastructure that you described that has been decimated as a result. How difficult did they make people's escape?
Oh yes, I'm reporting from Gweru, which is the third largest city in Zimbabwe. It's right in the middle, in the Midlands, which is in the middle of Zimbabwe. Gweru is pretty much a higher area relative to other places. Manicaland is in the eastern highlands of the country, but the eastern sides of the country, they're actually highlands. But the problem with Manicaland is that it's closer to the coast as you go towards Mozambique. And most of these emanate off the coast of Mozambique in the Indian Ocean through these cyclones that have become regular features of our here in Southern Africa. So in Zimbabwe, pretty much when the rains come, they are not as severe as they are when you come from the coastal areas. So you may realize that what you have been experiencing in South Africa and what we experience here is a relatively better, but the devastating effects are pretty much the same. It's just that like Mpumalanga in South Africa have borne the full brunt of the cyclones, you see. But pretty much people here in the rural areas, it's always harder because of the rivers and also the quality of the infrastructure that we've had in the last 25 years in Zimbabwe has not been exceptional. So you find that it's easy for those roads to be destroyed in rural areas. That is why you find areas like Chinoi, Chimanimani, some parts of Chipinge, those areas in Manicaland, they've borne the worst part of these rains.
Wellington, so just give us a sense of the quality of the homesteads, not only those that were destroyed, but just in terms of under government's national multi-hazard contingency plan, which was activated in December 2025. What improvements were made, and if those survived at all?
Well, I do not want to comment on something that I'm not fully aware of, but here in Zimbabwe, pretty much in the rural areas, we've got a mix of both good housings and mud huts, the traditional Rondaville type huts of housing. So I do not want to comment on what I do not have enough information on.
Okay, so then just tell us about the evacuation plans that are being made and what temporary housing is being put up.
So far, there's not been any temporary housing that I've seen, pretty much except rudimentary places where people are being taken, but you cannot, probably tents, but we don't have much in terms of safety nets or temporary shelters that have been put in place, except in Manicaland. But in other provinces, I've not seen that.
And as you mentioned earlier on, there has been warnings of worse weather in the offing. At least, is anything being done in evacuation plans? How is life going to be preserved?
Well, what we have seen is a lot of information circulating on WhatsApp platforms where citizens are discussing, and there's an official document that seems to have emanated from the government that is actually informing people to go to higher areas, keep safe, and exercise some precaution. But otherwise, other than those WhatsApp messages that I've been seeing and platforms that I'm involved in, I have not seen much.
Well, Wellington, as always, thank you so much for your insights. Wellington Muzengeza is an independent journalist speaking to us from Gweru in Zimbabwe, where, as he mentioned, is the third largest city in Zimbabwe, but also one of those areas that have been hit. And we will look at what's happening in Mozambique now, where the president there, Daniel Chapo, has cancelled his trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos.
Africa, it's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Tamo kutuli bwanji
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. And join the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
At 9:20, as we've been looking at the devastation in southern Africa, 3 countries that have been hard hit, more than 200 people who have died. We're talking about South Africa, talking about Zimbabwe. We've just been speaking to Wellington in Zimbabwe, and now we go to Mozambique, where, as I mentioned earlier on, President Daniel Chapo has cancelled his trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos, as his government prioritizes saving lives in the wake of the deadly floods that have pummeled part of that country as well. Footage shared by the United Nations Children's Fund shows rising water submerging trees, leaving only the top branches visible above the surface. For a look at UNICEF's humanitarian efforts in the wake of the floods, we speak now to UNICEF Mozambique spokesperson Guy Taylor, who is on the line to us from Shai in Mozambique. Guy, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
What situation are you being confronted with in Shai, but also if you're getting any information about the total death toll as a result of the floods in Mozambique?
Thank you. Yes, it's a very difficult situation here in Shai. As you described just now, we've seen very serious flooding across the southern part of the country, and Shai hit one of the hardest hit places in southern Mozambique. In just the past week, there has been around 700 millimeters, so about 70 centimeters of rainfall here, and that's led to a really serious flooding emergency. We know that about 500,000 people have been impacted so far, many of those children, about 50,000 people forced to flee their homes, and we've been seeing the impact of that here today on the ground. One of the biggest challenges at the moment is lack of access to some of the hardest to reach people. Many roads have been cut off. Over 300 kilometers of road network in Mozambique has been put out of action through the flooding, and that is presenting a serious challenge for the humanitarian response at the moment.
And just in terms of the total number of fatalities, we're getting a number of 100 that have died in Mozambique. Are you getting those figures? If not, what figures are you seeing in terms of the reported death toll?
I believe so. The numbers, the most authoritative source of numbers is the government of Mozambique, and the numbers I've seen for deaths at the moment are lower than that. I think it's testament to the efforts that have been put into early warning systems and in disaster planning, providing people with information on how to stay safe during flooding, and that has resulted in, I think, a lower death toll than we've seen in some previous disasters in Mozambique. But still certainly having a major impact. And what we're particularly concerned about as UNICEF is the impact on children and the impact over the medium and longer term. So we have huge amounts of standing water here. We're very worried about the risk of waterborne diseases of typhoid, cholera, malaria, diarrhea, some of the biggest killers of children, but also the prolonged lack of access to some of the critical services that children need to stay alive, to stay healthy, and of course to stay learning with education. So many challenges facing the people of Mozambique in this part of the country.
And just to focus on that, I understand from reports that about 126 schools or more have been damaged and destroyed, including health facilities. So that surely must complicate your ability to keep children safe, keep them in school, and actually give them the necessary health emergency that needs to be afforded to them. So what are you doing? And I also want to understand the early warning systems, what mechanisms are in place to prevent further deaths or displacement.
Yeah, So what UNICEF would typically do in a crisis or a disaster like the one we're seeing in here is we will quickly bring in large quantities of essential supplies. So things like water purification tablets, water storage, supplies, medicines, things that children can use, recreational kits, so that children can have a sense of normality and play. And we also bring in big, sturdy tents, which can be used as classrooms, as health facilities, temporary clinics. So that work is underway to get those supplies on the ground and distributed to the areas where they're needed the most. And then, of course, we support the government response and coordinate with humanitarian partners to get those services back online. So to make sure that children are having access to some form of learning, to make sure that, for example, children who are suffering from severe acute malnutrition, which can kill children in a matter of hours or days, are receiving the treatment that they need. In terms of early warning systems, there's been a lot of efforts around that in recent years. As I'm sure you're aware, Mozambique is now being hit on a pretty much an annual basis by tropical cyclones. Indeed, we were hit by 3 last year in one cyclone season. And the government and organizations like UNICEF are doing a lot of work to send information out to people through SMS systems, through on-the-ground mechanisms, going around with megaphones and telling people about how to find safety, and also about making information online available around how to, for example, to protect yourself during flooding, how to keep safe during the cyclone, and things like that. And I think that is paying off in terms of lives saved and reductions in property damage. So it's one positive within this very concerning trend of increasing climate shocks that are hitting this country and the region.
And speaking of increasing, you did mention earlier on the advent of diseases, waterborne diseases such as cholera. Are there fears of there being an even wider outbreak given these current conditions? And I also would like to understand, I know you're doing your part, but is there a shortage of temporary accommodation?
Certainly, there's a very real threat of cholera. Indeed, even before this flooding event, we had been seeing cholera cases cropping up in various parts of Mozambique. This kind of flooding creates the perfect conditions for cholera and other waterborne diseases, so I think it's inevitable that we will see further spread. There are a number of things that can be done to help to prevent and slow that. Things like I was mentioning before, the distribution of supplies to treat and purify water, sharing information with people on how to access safe water, how to purify water, how to store water safely. Of course, the distribution of medication, vaccine drives against cholera, which UNICEF has been prioritizing in recent months, and the setting up of cholera treatment centers, and also isolation of cases to ensure that where cholera does occur, it doesn't spread further. So that's something which we're working on certainly at the moment, again, in support of government and together with our partners. But I will say that the humanitarian response and organizations like UNICEF are very much overstretched by this current crisis. Mozambique is a country where even before this crisis, there were millions of people requiring humanitarian aid and support. And we're also entering into the cyclone season. So a very big concern that we might end up with a much bigger challenge on our hands without the resources really needed to be able to address it in an effective manner.
And just very quickly, one of those I'd imagine of concern is food. Many crops are waterlogged. So what challenges does that produce for you in terms of child malnutrition?
It produces tremendous challenges. Obviously, when children don't have access to nutritious food, their chance of developing malnutrition goes up, and that is both long-term malnutrition, which can lead to stunting and poor brain development and growth, but also short-term malnutrition, which is essentially starvation, which can lead to death very quickly. We're working with partners like the World Food Programme to support their efforts to distribute food to communities who have lost often everything, many people living subsistence agriculture in Mozambique, and many tens of thousands of hectares of cropland have been destroyed, and animals drowned or killed through the flooding. As UNICEF, we focus primarily on treatment of children who've already developed malnutrition. So we work on distribution and treatment of using therapeutic foods and milks once children are diagnosed as being malnourished. And we also focus a lot on water and sanitation and hygiene, because one of the biggest causes of malnutrition is actually poor hygiene, where children develop diarrhea, which leads to malnutrition. So we're working together with our partners based on our different areas of expertise to ensure a holistic response that reaches every child affected by this crisis.
And we do wish you all the best, and we certainly will be checking in with you to spread the word, help out in whatever efforts we can in the important work that you're doing. UNICEF Mozambique spokesperson Guy Taylor speaking to us from Shai in Mozambique, where he says that area has also been very badly hit by the recent floods.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Tumeona chapisho mapema hii leo ya kwamba Wizara ya Mambo ya Nje ya nchini Marekani imesema inapitia upya uhusiano wake na nchi ya Tanzania. Pengine taarifa hii imepokelewaje na wananchi wa Tanzania?
Cha kwanza tumeiona taarifa ambayo imetoka hii leo. Sisi kwetu taarifa hii haikutushangaza wala haikutushtua, kwa sababu tulishaona taarifa kama hiyo imetoka kwenye ubalozi wa Marekani nchini Tanzania, ikiwa imetolewa na Bwana Tom Pigot.
Umezungumza kwa kina kabisa. Haya ni malalamiko ambayo yamekuwa yakijitokeza mara kwa mara. Unadhani sasa je, wana hoja ya msingi?
Unauliza maswali mazuri sana na maswali ya tafakari. Maswali ambayo hayawezi kujibiwa kwa dakika moja au kwa moja. Ni maswali yanayohitaji tafiti, yanayohitaji kusoma.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Channel Africa is moving with the times, and so is our WhatsApp line. We've changed our WhatsApp number, making it even easier for you to stay connected. Send us your voice notes, comments, shout outs, and song requests to our new WhatsApp number, +27 83 288 6684. That's +27 83 288 6684. Save it, share it, and stay in the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And it is now 27 minutes to 10. Soldiers from the Democratic Republic of Congo and combatants from a pro-government militia have re-entered the eastern town of Uvira just over a month after the strategic town fell to Rwanda-backed M23 rebels in a blow to peace efforts mediated by the United States. M23 entered Uvira, an important base for the Congolese army near the border with Burundi, on December 10. That's days after Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi and Rwandan leader Paul Kagame met President Donald Trump in Washington and reaffirmed an US-backed peace deal. To residents and a civil society based in Uvira said on Monday that Congolese soldiers and members of the Wazalendo militia returned over the weekend and were visible throughout the town, having retaken positions they occupied before M23's arrival. For a look at what is happening now on the ground and in the region, we speak to independent journalist Jafar Al-Katanti, who joins us from Goma in the DRC. Jafar, very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you. Same to you too.
So does the entry of DRC soldiers and the Wazalenda into Uvira indicate that M23 has fully withdrawn from the county?
Yes, that's what we can say at the moment, because there is 2 weeks ago when by a communique of Colonel Nanga, the head of the alliance of M23 and AFC, say that they are leaving Uvira. but we was getting information from some people in Uvira saying that they still seeing soldiers of M23 in some places of the city. But on Saturday, there was another communique indicated that the last M23 soldiers was leaving Uvira, and we saw it like yesterday and today was Alendo and FRDC getting Uvira, and the population of Uvira was so happy welcoming DRC forces and their Wazalendo. So this means that Uvira is now empty from M23.
And the M23 spokesperson Lawrence Kanyuka reported as saying that Uvira will be under the full responsibility of the international community. What does that mean exactly?
No one know about what will this mean, but the communique of Lawrence Kanyuka showed that M23 will leave. M23 is leaving Uvira, then the city will be controlled by the international community. But you know that we have here in DRC, especially in Eastern DRC, a big UN forces, and we all thought that it will be MONUSCO who will replace M23 in the zone. But today, we knew that FRDC and Wazalendo recovered the city, which was withdrawn by M23.
And that leads to the wider, bigger question of context, understanding exactly why Uvira was seen as strategic for the whole M23 offensive. What can you tell us about their presence there and why residents are still afraid that they could still be in the area?
You know, the zone of Uvira is so strategic and also have a problem of the community Banyamulenge. Banyamulenge are Congolese Tutsi living in the territory of Uvira, and they are always being pointed by other communities in that zone to be alongside M23. You know, Banyamulenge has their own militia called Twirwaneho, which is now fighting alongside M23. So for M23, it was a good deal to take Uvira so that they protect Wanyamulenge, and also they cut the link between FRDC and Burundian forces. You know, Uvira is the biggest border between DRC and Burundi. So all the reinforcement of Burundian forces was present by Uvira, and also the DRC armed forces was using the Bujumbura airport to reinforce troops in Uvira. So taking Uvira by M23 was a good deal to M23. And also for the government of DRC, Uvira was important that getting it back is a big thing because they will still using the Burundian airport, and also the reinforcement will be easy from Burundi to Uvira and other zones.
But since the withdrawal began, there still have been reports of sporadic gunfire, of looting. So if M23 says it has withdrawn, does it mean that it could still have allies who are there, who are not necessarily out in the open or recognized as allies of M23?
On a communique, the spokesperson of FRDC said, recognized that there was some acts of looting, but done by population and not by Wazalendo or soldiers. And they say that 20 people have been arrested because they were seen doing looting in the city of Uvira. But fighting in the zone are still ongoing because M23 are not themselves far. They are at Sange. Sange is a village not far from Uvira. It's around 25 kilometers north of Uvira. And in the west of Uvira, fightings are always ongoing. And this withdrawal of M23 from Uvira is not a kind of guarantee to the population of the zone. Maybe in Uvira, but not in the entire zone. And I heard from some Wazalendo leaders saying Uvira is the first city that we will recover, but it's not the end. We will continue pushing M23. So according to these talks, it means that Wazalendo and FRDC will continue pushing, maybe fighting against M23 in order to push them back far from Uvira.
Is there a sense that, dealing with the displacements, that people once again being able to take up their livelihoods and have humanitarian access, that will be the true indication that M23 has withdrawn and the peace process is holding?
At the moment, not yet. As I told you, even if Uvira is now out of the M23 zone, but Uvira is still isolated by M23, because in the north, we have M23 at Sange, which is 20-something kilometers, and in the west, M23 are also at 30 kilometers. So there is still no road linking Uvira to the other government zone. So the humanitarian assistance may be later because of this logistics. But as I told you, fightings are still ongoing in other villages in the same zone. Many people are still fleeing. For example, with the coming back of Wazalendo in Uvira, some people in Wanyamulenge community who fear about themselves as they are appointed to be with M23 had to leave the city of Uvira and to follow M23 in Sange, where I know that they will be as IDPs because they left their villages, their city, to another city where there will be IDPs without any humanitarian assistance. So the problem is still complex, and I don't think there will be an arrangement today or tomorrow, because I saw it in Goma here where I am when the city was isolated from the north and west of the city, and no NGO was really free to operate and to support the IDPs as it's called. And this is what it will happen in Uvira too, because Uvira is like isolated.
Jaffa, thank you so much for that. Independent journalist Jaffa Katanti speaking to us from Goma about the situation in Uvira and whether or not the M23 have completely pulled out and as has been reported, and as he confirmed that the DRC military forces and the Wazalenda, who are their allies, are moving into Uvira. And it's a wait and see just with regards to the people who fled the area, whether they'll be able to come back anytime soon. It brings the time to 17 minutes to 10.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa World Hour, unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
And at 15 minutes to 10, let's take a look at the situation in Uganda. The opposition party there, the National Unity Platform, has intensified its rejection of the outcome of the 15 January general elections, which returned President Yoweri Museveni back to power. Speaking to Channel Africa after a protest march at the Ugandan embassy in Pretoria on Monday, NUP convener Richard Kamya accused the Ugandan authorities of presiding over a fundamentally compromised electoral process. Kamya alleged widespread military interference in voting, ballot stuffing and systemic manipulation of results, saying the party does not recognize the election outcome and considers the process illegitimate. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe was there at the protest.
The protest follows the declaration of results from Uganda's 15 January general elections, in which the Electoral Commission announced a landslide victory for incumbent President Yoweri Museveni. The announcement was immediately disputed by opposition parties, particularly the National Unity Platform, which alleged that the electoral process was marred by widespread irregularities and state interference. Against this backdrop, Ugandan citizens living in South Africa organized a protest march to the Ugandan embassy in Pretoria on Monday, where they delivered a memorandum of demands calling for the removal of President Museveni and the rejection of the election results. The demonstration was led by the NUP's official chapter in South Africa, which said the protest was intended to amplify the voices of Ugandans who it claims were disenfranchised during the polls. Party convener Richard Kamya explains.
We have converged here this morning purposely to make our statement very, very, very clear against the regime. This house belongs to us. This is the Uganda mission and this is our house. We have converged here this morning to make it very clear to the regime that we don't recognize the results pronounced by Byabakama in the recent concluded elections back in Uganda. There is enough evidence all over the country. There is enough evidence all over the internet for the election being rigged. We have the military running ballot boxes. We have the military ticking ballot boxes. We have a whole polling area in the western region where electoral officers were ticking the bottom of that ballot box. When you look at that ballot paper, the bottom guy there is Museveni.
He accused the government of killing 12 people believed to be opposition supporters, carrying out arbitrary arrests and allowing the military to interfere in the electoral process.
Our deputy president in Uganda, at his home, we have 12 people shot dead purposely because they were suspected of being supporters of the opposition. We have evidence from the northern region where our deputy president is already locked up. We don't even know where she is. We have hundreds of our colleagues shot, seated in hospitals. Many have disappeared. We have 740 colleagues who were arrested, not even arresting, kidnapped before the election. You know, an election is not supposed to be free and fair on election day, right? It should happen before, during, and after. Hours from the word go, when campaigns were launched, we had the military covering our leader. We had our president being blocked on main roads. If you go through our trail, you realize that every time Bobi Wine is shown on screens, he's on a dusty road.
He said that in South Africa, their position is unequivocal. They completely reject the legitimacy of the declared leaders.
What statement are we making here in South Africa? We made it very clear here that we don't recognize Museveni's regime. We don't recognize the current government. Yes. We don't recognize all the other members of parliament that have been nominated.
Accepting the memorandum, Ugandan Embassy Representative Commissioner Richard Opio commended the group for conducting a peaceful protest and urged them to pursue lawful channels in raising their electoral concerns.
Came here peacefully, and we thank you for this memoranda that you've submitted. I assure you that this document will be forwarded with immediate effect to its final destination. We just want to request, and I appreciate that you continue to keep law and order, and I just pray that you keep watch of each other, follow the laws of South Africa, remain loving to one another, support your country. You have only one country, and that is Uganda. There's no another home that you have apart from that home. As you bring your issues, your concerns, which I have listened to carefully and attentively, I just pray that as you go back home, you keep your effort, your political duties, because it's guaranteed by the Constitution of Uganda as well, that you keep them peacefully. And we know that the processes in Uganda still work. We know that if the parties who have been defeated, whether at the parliamentary level or the presidential level will take the necessary legal processes back home to have the grievances addressed. On our part as a mission, we remain committed to serving all of you irrespective of your political colors.
In response to Opio's remarks, Kamia pushed back, saying the opposition had pursued those avenues before and no longer had confidence in the judicial process.
We've been that route before. The last 2021 elections, we went to the Constitutional Court. We actually even went, I think, to the Supreme Court. But you know what is happening in Uganda? We don't have an independent institution. We have all institutions captured by one man. We have all institutions answering to one man. You have a judge who answers to Museveni.
Channel Africa spoke to a woman called Nansubuga Scovia, who confirmed that her son was abducted along with 30 others and has since disappeared without a trace.
The son, they told me he was going back home. He find the people when they are walking, striking. Even him, he joined to strike. Then they kidnap them. All of them, they are 30. They take them in the jail. I don't know what is going to happen. Even now I'm stressed for my son because I send my mother to go there. They never see him.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
And at 9 minutes to 10, let's end with this. Namibian courts have seen a steady increase in the number of divorce cases in the past 3 years, with some blaming a lack of experienced pastors who may not be fully equipped to guide couples through marital challenges. This comes as the country's High Court recorded a total of 111 divorce cases today alone, with the Windhoek Division recording 67 and the Oshakati Division recording 44 divorce matters on the roll. Despite this rise, Namibia remains on the lower end of divorce rates when compared to neighboring African countries. South Africa 2.1 per 1,000 population and Zimbabwe at 0.007 per 1,000 people. For a look at the figures, we're joined now on the line by Namibian independent journalist Shelley Peterson. Very good evening, Shelley, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening. Hi from the land of the brave, and I hope your evening is going well.
Well, it's going well, but somewhat surprised to hear about this. So we said 111 cases today alone, but we're still saying that Namibia still has a lower record of divorces. So can you just give us a clearer picture of what is happening here and why?
Yeah, I think I don't want to say fashion, but being married and the idea of weddings truly is a trend in Namibia. If you can look at weddings in December, in a church you can have up to 20 brides and grooms getting married at once. So a lot of the stuff, and as the report said, right, you have a lot of pastors who do marry young people, and I mean it's profitable. Churches make money off of weddings. Any officiants make money out of weddings. We also have the pressure of sort of the home, the idea of what a home should be, a wholesome home, is very much popular in Namibia. And after 1 or 2 years, 3 years at some after 5 years, 10 years, realize that actually I didn't get married for the right choices. So, I mean, it's both the idea of what a marriage should like, that ideal, wholesome family image, but also just a money-making scheme for a lot of people. You also have an increase of immigrants marrying Namibians to stay in the country. That's also been on the rise, to the extent where our country has now put an amnesty on illegal immigrants in the country who can bring themselves to the forefront, and they can either leave the country or the country will find out a way to process them. So the number of divorces is also as a result of the wedding, the idea of what a wedding is or what a marriage should be and a family should be like. But also young people just realizing that getting married young is really not what they thought it would be, and the idea of what marriage should be.
And I see your country introduced the Dissolution of Marriages Act 10 of 2024. How did that overhaul, divorce laws, and explain to us about this no-fault divorce and how it decentralized court proceedings and replaced adultery and desertion with irretrievable breakdown?
Let me give you a picture of what it was. Just a hint there that that law hasn't been enacted
Enacted.
and
Okay.
implemented. So we have this law in place, but it can't be enacted because right now there is sort of a very uncomfortable relationships between our magistrates or our judicial commission and our Minister of Justice. They are at loggerheads over salary increments. But what this new law, the new divorced act, is supposed to do is take the current divorce proceedings, which is only allowed in our high courts, and we only have two high courts in the country. We have one in Windhoek and we have one in Oshakati, as you said. We have none in the south. And from Windhoek to the biggest town down south is about 4.5 hours. So that was also some part of the problem. A second problem is, like you said, the current law allows for no fault. So currently, if you want to divorce, there must be a partner who's at fault. Someone must be the problem. It can't just be we agree and we want to divorce. No, there must be a partner at fault. Secondly, in our current law, or the current divorce law that's still in place, is that there needs to be, so if you get divorced, you can't just move out of your house. You first have to come back to your marriage. It's called a restitution order. So you must come back and try to figure out what's wrong. So if it's a if your divorce is as a result of domestic violence, it just puts you back in the problem that you're trying to solve. So it's very expensive. So you must have a lawyer. You must be in court at some point during your divorce proceedings. So it's very expensive. Someone needs to be a problem, and you will have to come back to the marital house, whether you want to or not, and solve the problem. So it's a very lengthy process. That process can take you, 2 to 3 years to get divorced. So the new law, which we hope will be implemented this year after the minister and the magistrates sort out their salary increments, hopefully then we will see a better divorce proceeding.
But so then, does that mean that there is no concept such as a no contest divorce, where, as you mentioned, a couple can agree that they're just parting ways?
So only now, with the 2014 act that was passed in Parliament, only now you can have a divorce proceeding where you both decided, listen, it's irretrievable, breakdown, we can't solve this, we can divorce. But before that, no. Remember, this is pre-independence. This is a very apartheid law that we haven't changed since. Now it's 36 years of independence for Namibia. And then, 24 years later is when we decided, no, 34 years later is when we decided maybe we should change the law. And so it dragged a lot of couples through a lot of what they want to forget. They are constantly being dragged through during the court proceedings.
And customary law, what is the state of customary law versus civil, customary marriage versus civil marriage in Namibia?
Yeah, so that is very much two different parts within the Namibian justice system. So you can get married, for instance, in customary law above the red line. So the red line was this line implemented during the apartheid era, which is still in place in Namibia, that you can get married within customary law above the red line, and then you can get married down the red line. So being polyamorous or having a polyamorous marriage does not exist in Namibia's law books. So you can, but there is this loophole which a lot of Namibians are taking advantage of or want to take advantage of. You can get married in the north of the country with customary law. So that will be a traditional wedding that is officiated by the headman of your village or officiant. Normally, sometimes it is a pastor up in the north. And then in just a little bit below the red line, which also south of the red line is where Windhoek is in. So you can come to Windhoek and you can have your civil marriage, and these two will never meet each other. Divorce proceedings in the customary is separate. Divorce proceedings here are separate. We currently have an accused person in court who was perhaps one of the first that we've seen openly admit that I am married to two wives, one in the north via customary and one in the south via civil law.
Shelley, thank you so much for clearing that up. So the story is that Namibia is seeing a record number of divorces, but it is still significantly lower in terms of figures of the number of divorces that we're seeing in South Africa. And she's saying it's as a result of a number of things. The fashionability of weddings versus marriages. We're still saying the policy gaps, including lack of awareness in some of the rural populations there regarding of their rights under the new Dissolution of Marriages Act as well, that also plays a role in it. Shelley Peterson is a Namibian independent journalist, brings the time to exactly 10 o'clock. Quick check into African Diaries. This is how you're introducing your show on Africa.
Absolutely. We might as well start here. So
might as well.
Today we're looking at self-love and communal love. In the first hour of the show, we're looking at goals and why they fail by February. Why do those habits that we're trying to build towards a set goal sort of crumble before we even see the end of January is the question. And then in the second hour of the show, we're going to be looking at an exclusive networking soiree between South African professionals and American professionals. The brow raised?
No, because I know there is an organization that's been in the country for quite a while that does specifically that. So I was just wondering, I wonder if it's the same organization.
You know what? We'll find out in a short bit.
All right. Shayla and Kumana coming up next from us. It's goodbye for now.
Conversations that touch the heart and inspire change. Here on African Diaries, only on Channel Africa. Join us on www.channelafrica.co.